Hi, this is Bill Raymond, and this is the second video I've created on the new Git user experience in Visual Studio 2019. The first video just covered Git. This video is going to be all about GitHub. You can look at the chapters here. Those are also in the show notes. And of course, you can scrub along the YouTube player to get to the topic you're interested in. Everything I'm about to show you in this video works with Visual Studio 2019, whether it's the free community version, which I'm using, the professional, or the enterprise version. Before we get started, we want to make sure all of the components are installed. So go to the Start menu and type Visual Studio Installer and run that. As you can see, I have multiple copies of Visual Studio installed. You have to use 2019. Again, you can use any of the 2019 versions. You must have at least 16.8 installed. I'm at 16.8.4. Yours might even be a higher version. Just make sure that you're at least at 16.8. And if you see an option to update, go ahead and do that now. You'll also find this Modify button. Go ahead and select that. Then choose Individual Components and search for the word Git. Make sure Git for Windows is selected and GitHub extension for Visual Studio. If it's not, go ahead and select those and install them. If you don't already own a GitHub account, you'll need to set one up. Go to github.com and you'll find the sign up link. Just go ahead and do that. It's free for anything that we're doing here. While we won't be using the command line that much, we're just going to be using it once in this entire video, I do want to make sure that we have the latest version of Git on our computer. So go to git-scm.com and download the latest version. I happen to be running this on a Windows machine, so I'm going to download 2.30.0. Make sure that you are at least at 2.30. Git is really nothing more than a source control manager. This allows you to track versions of your product. Now, by default, when you install Git on your computer and Visual Studio uses Git, what will happen is you will have a master branch. And that master branch is sort of think of it as the main line for you to manage all of your code. That master branch always usually has the latest and greatest code, the production code, the code that has the least number of bugs or issues. It's something you give to a customer. Now, in order to keep that branch clean, what you'll do is create new branches, and you'll fix an issue, add a new feature, and then put that code back into the main line or the master branch. Now, there's a little bit of confusion that can happen if you're just getting started, and that's that you can do the same exact Git flow on GitHub or any other online Git source control product, and by default, you're going to find out that most of them have moved to main as being the primary first branch. That's actually useful because when you're talking about main, you're talking not only about the main branch, but the main line, your production code. So all of the stuff is the same, except on your local computer it defaults to master, and on the remote server it defaults to main. Since you're probably going to be doing software development on your local computer and with GitHub, it's best to just use the same exact default branch, and GitHub uses main. So what we're going to do is set the default on our local computer to main. So let's go to the Start menu and type Git. The Git client will appear, and now we're going to type in a command, and we're going to type git space config space -- global space init dot, and I'm going to type default branch with the word default being in lowercase, and we uppercase the letter B in branch, and then we type the name of our default branch. Now I can type anything here. I could call it Bill. It doesn't matter what I type, but the point here is that all the online training, everything that we're going to read about is going to talk about either the master or the main branch. And most all documentation has switched to the word main. So we should not go and create our own unless we have some really unique reason to do so. So anyway, we have git config global init default branch main, and I'll press enter. If there was an error, then I would see it here, but there isn't, so we're good. Let's just make sure that GitHub is also using that main branch. So here I am in github.com, and I'm logged in. I'm going to go to the top right and click on my avatar. I'll choose Settings, and then I'll find the Repositories link. And then right here at the top, you can see the repository default branch, and there it is indeed main. If it says something else, you probably want to change it to main right now. Do keep in mind it's only going to be for new repos, not existing ones. We need to make sure that the Git and GitHub features are enabled inside of Visual Studio. So go to your Start menu and run Visual Studio 2019. Then continue without code. Go to the Tools menu and choose Options. Now you might get upset with me. I'm going to type the word Preview and go to Preview Features. You might be thinking, Bill, why are you showing this to me? I only want to work with production level features. I don't want to use preview features. Well, Microsoft released this already with 12.8. Why they're still under preview features, I'm not sure. I think it's still because they're iterating on it and they're going to keep adding new features. But for now, really, you can select both the new Git Experience and the GitHub Actions support for Publish. Go ahead and click OK if those weren't selected. I already had them selected, and you should have a Git menu. Now, if you don't see that, you'll probably need to exit Visual Studio and come back in. All right, let's get started by creating our first project on our computer. So I'll go to the Start menu and run Visual Studio 2019. Right now what we're going to do is create a brand new project. So let's go ahead and choose this Continue Without Code option. Now I want to create a project using ASP.NET, and it really honestly does not matter. You can create any kind of project you want. And don't worry, we're not actually really doing much coding here. We're just going to be playing with the word hello world quite a bit. So just go ahead and select ASP.NET Core Web Application or something you're familiar with. I'll click Next. And for the project name, I'm going to call this VS-2019-GitHub User Experience. I'm just putting dashes between things because I like that when I'm using things that will show up in URLs. I'll go ahead and click Create. And I'll choose Empty, which isn't really empty. We'll see that in a second. And I'll just go ahead and close this ASP.NET Core training that shows up. And you can see a number of files were created for me. We're not using Git right now. But one of the things that I do see is there's a startup.cs file. And if I double click on that, it does show the word hello world when we run it in a browser. So I'll just go ahead and do that right now just to make sure that it works. Okay, after pressing the run button, you can see I have the browser open and it says hello world. That's good enough for me. I'll close this down. Before we go and publish our project to GitHub, let's go to the right place. We'll go up to github.com, go to our avatar on the top right, and choose Your Repositories. You can see I have 10 repositories, and here's a list of all of them. Back in Visual Studio, what we want to do is what's called a push. We're going to push our code up to GitHub. Now, there's two different things here. We have a local Git repository. That's what we're going to work with when we, let's say, are doing our standard software development, and then we can push that code up to GitHub when we're ready. Now, the way to do that, you can actually do this in multiple ways. I'm just going to show you real quick. If I go to the File menu, I can choose Add to Source Control, and I'll get a dialog that looks like this. I'm going to close it. I can go to the Git menu. I can choose Create a Git Repository. Same dialog. Okay, I can also go over here to Git Changes and click Create a Git Repository. So every one of these ways does the same exact thing. Now, if you've watched previous videos, you know that I like to come down here to the bottom right corner where I choose Add to Source Control and choose Git. It's the same dialog, but the reason for why I like to focus my attention down here in the bottom right is I get all sorts of information about Git and GitHub, and it's the only place where I can see this information at all times, no matter what code I'm working in. So let's go ahead and create the Git repository. First, we're going to initialize the local Git repository. This is going to be the one we work with when we're not pushing things up to GitHub. And we're also going to make sure we're logged in. If you see an account owner here and it's not filled in, just go ahead and sign in to GitHub. It'll ask you for the repository name. Now, you could change this, but I think it's a very good idea to keep everything the same. Your project name in Visual Studio, your folder for Visual Studio project, and the repository name, just keep them all the same. It will make it a lot easier for you to manage in the future. In the description, I'll just type a test GitHub repo. Okay, finally, it's going to ask you if you want to make your project private or not. Private means that you manage access to who can access your repo. I'm going to say not private. That means anyone can access it. I'm going to delete this after I'm done anyway. By the way, this usually means that your project is open source, or you're at least sharing your code with other people to see. I'll go ahead and click Create and Push. I'm going to ask you to pay your attention down here to the bottom right. First, you'll see this up arrow that says 2. There's 2 unpushed commits. And very shortly, it's going to say 0. And then you can see over here on the left, it has the GitHub logo, and it's saying, here's your account, and here's your repo name in GitHub. So it has successfully been pushed over there. If I click on this, you can see it opens up the GitHub tab over here. I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer. The other thing that I'll notice is that you'll notice is that the local Git repo is listed here. This is the one you're going to work with when you're doing your day-to-day development in Visual Studio 2019. Finally, we have the main branch. Remember, this could say master or main. We made the choice in this video to set everything to main because that's kind of the new way things are going. Now, if I come over here to Git changes, you'll notice that there are no changes. That's good. So I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer and see what exactly happened. The first thing I want to do is come up over here to the Git menu and choose Manage Branches. But again, I am going to point out, I can come down here to the bottom right, and choose Manage Branches. Now remember before, Git said that it was pushing up 2 items. Remember this arrow said it was pushing up 2 items? What happened was, first, a git ignore and git attributes file was created in our repo. We'll talk about that shortly. And then, of course, the main branch was created. So those are the 2 things that got pushed up to GitHub. So speaking of GitHub, let's go back over there and refresh the browser. We should go from 10 repositories, which I have, to 11, and you can see the very first repository is the new one we just created. So I'll just go ahead and click on that. And you can see here's that git attributes and git ignore. And over here we have a folder, and this includes our code. You can see there's that startup.cs file. We can actually edit this whole thing. There's that hello world that we looked at before. We can actually edit this code right here inside of GitHub. And that's totally perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, some people like to do that for various reasons, but using Visual Studio on your local computer, of course, you have a lot more control, you have a lot more tooling. I'm going to go back here, and I want to focus for a moment on this .git attributes and .git ignore. So let's find those inside of Visual Studio. Back in Visual Studio, we still see that .git ignore and .git attributes, but it's not located here. That's because Visual Studio 2019 gives us a presentation layer for our project. It knows it's a C# project, so it lays it out a certain way. Behind there, though, is just a regular folder structure. And to get to that, we want to go to the little icon here. We have to be in Solution Explorer. Go to the little icon here that says Switch Views. Then you can open up the folder, and you can see there's .git attributes. I'll double click on that, and there's .git ignore. You're going to have to understand what these are and read up on them, by default, there's some really good stuff already put in there to make your life easy. For me, I've never once modified these, but I'm sure that I would in the future as I learn more. Git ignore will just make sure that things like special files, like a certificate file, doesn't just go up onto GitHub for people to download. That's a very private and secure file. You don't want that going up onto GitHub. So you can actually ignore that in your Git repo. And then you have Git attributes, and this defines some of how Git works internally for this specific project. Now I'm going to close these down. And I'm going to come back over here. How do I get back to my project? Well, if I click this switch views icon, it kind of just switches the folder view. So what you want to do is find the solution file or the project file and double click on that, and it brings you right back to where you were before. Now we're going to make a change locally on our code and then push it up when appropriate to GitHub. So I'm going to just close down this manage branches thing here, and I'm going to create a new branch. And I'll call this modify hello text and check out to that branch. If you want to go through all the details of managing branches and making changes, go to the original video that I have on using Git with Visual Studio 2019. So we're now in this modify hello text branch. I'm going to open up startup.cs, and I'm going to change this hello world text to hello first change and save that. I have my little pending edit checkbox, and I'm going to come over here to Git changes. Now I'm going to enter a message, and I'm going to say modified hello world to hello first change. Okay, something like that. Now, if I click this little pick list here next to commit all, you can see I can commit all, and push to GitHub, or commit all and sync, which not only pushes my change up to GitHub, but if there's any changes in GitHub, it will bring them down to me. Now, right now, we're just going to commit this change locally. So I'll choose commit all. And you can see there's my commit message. I want to point this out over here. It says there's 1 outgoing and 0 incoming. This means I have a change that I've made locally, and Visual Studio is recommending I get that up onto GitHub, which is exactly what we want Visual Studio to do. It's let you know when you're out of sync. Now I can also take a look down here on the bottom right, and you can see there's that same one. It says 1 unpushed commit. And if I click on that, it brings me to the Manage Branches area. And you can see here's that new commit that I made along with the name of the branch. So what's nice about this is I do get a chance to visually see kind of what's happening here. Now, if I want to push this up to GitHub at some point, what I can do is make sure that I'm at the Git Changes tab. And then over here on the top right, there's a little push icon. I'll just go ahead and do that now. There we go. It's pushing it. You can see that it's actually compressing the code before it sends it up, make it faster to do the upload, and then I get this successfully pushed message. I'll go ahead and close that. You can also see that the branch changed here. There's no longer one more outgoing change. Now let's just verify that what we did in Visual Studio did indeed show up in GitHub. So here I am in GitHub, and I'm in the repo that we created earlier. And you can see I get this nice little notification letting me know that this branch was recently pushed a few minutes ago. And I can go into the code. So I'll just drill down and locate this startup.cs file that we changed in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to scroll down here. You can see it says hello world. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute, Bill. We changed that to hello first change. How come it says hello world? Well, remember, we created a new branch. So let's see if that exists. I'll scroll to the top and you'll see the word main. That's our main branch. If I select that, I can go to modify hello text. And when I do that and scroll down, it now says hello first change. So congratulations, you just did your first push from Visual Studio up to GitHub. The purpose of this video is, of course, to show you how to work with GitHub and Visual Studio. In the following video, I'll actually show you how to do things like pull requests and actually collaborate with other people. In this particular video, I'm just going to show you how to merge the change that we made and put it up into GitHub. So right now, I'm going to go to the Modify Hello Text branch over here and choose Manage Branches. I'm going to go to the main branch by right-clicking and choosing Checkout. I'll right-click on Modify Hello Text, and I'm going to merge that into main and say yes. You can see that that occurred, which is great. And you can see down here at the bottom of the screen, there's one unpushed commit. So as always, I can go over here to Git Changes, and I can click this little push button, and that sends it up to GitHub. And I can just wait for that push to complete right here, and I wait for that success message. Okay. Now we're back in GitHub, and we're at our repo, and we're also on the main branch. And right above my code, you can see it says Bill Raymond modified hello world to hello first change. There's our commit. And I can verify that that hello world is gone by going into the folder and going to startup.cs. And remember, we're on the main branch, and see it says hello first change. So we modified the code in Visual Studio 2019, and we pushed that up, so we had the new branch up here. Then we merged the branch in Visual Studio 2019, and we can see that after we pushed it, GitHub is recognizing this is the new code change. Okay, we made a change in Visual Studio and pushed it up to GitHub. What happens if we want to make a change in GitHub and have that come down to Visual Studio? Let's take a look at that right now. The first thing we'll do is go back up to the root of our project folder. And what we're going to do is add a README file. A README file, as you can see right down here, GitHub's recommending that we create one. It says, help people interested in the repository understand your project. Whether you have an open source project or a private repo, what you want to do is add a README file so that people will understand what the project is. And you'll also want to inform people how to set up the code. Maybe you want to explain how you can set up a local development environment so you can use your code or whatever. You want to add a README file. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to click Add a README. And you can see here, it's using what's called Markdown language. We're not really going to get into it too much. You can see this little hashtag in the front. That's the equivalent of creating like an H1 tag, a title kind of style tag on a HTML page. So you can see that right here. If I go to preview, see how VS 2019 GitHub User Experience is big and bold, and then a test GitHub repo is smaller. I can come down here and say how to install this code, and then I'll just do a one clone to use. Okay, that's my simple instruction, and I can preview that, and you can see it looks pretty good. Now that I've edited the file, what I want to do is save it. And when I save it, I'm actually going to commit it. So I'm going to, it automatically, GitHub says create a readme.md as the new commit message by default. If I want to type something else, I can. I'll just say added how to install code or something like that. Okay. And then it's saying, where do you want to commit this? Do you want to commit it directly to the main branch? Or do you want to create a brand new branch? For purposes of this demo, we're going to put it right in the main branch, and I'll choose commit new file. There, you can see that we have a new README file that's showing up on GitHub, and there's that README file right underneath .git attributes and .git ignore. Now I want to see this new change come from GitHub into Visual Studio. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I can see where the README file comes in. Remember, the Git attributes and Git ignore file aren't displayed here, nor will that README file. What I need to do is come over here to the switch view icon and go out into the folder view. Now there's Git attributes and Git ignore. There's no README right now. Let's come over here to the Git changes tab. And then come over here where it says fetch. You can see there's fetch and pull. I'm going to fetch any new changes. And there we see there's one incoming change. I'm going to switch over here to Solution View, Solution Explorer, and you can see it's still not there. So I'll head back to Git Changes, and I'll select this link. And now you can see I can actually take a look at the incoming change. I added how to install code. This is where we actually created the readme.md file. So now that I've fetched this code, I can double click on it. And you can see there's the change right here, the readme.md file. If I double click on this over here, I can see what's going on. Okay, I'm happy with this change. So there's a few ways that I can bring this code over. But right now what I'm going to do is just select this again over here in the branches, manage branches area here, and choose pull. There, and I've just committed that. So this was a simple little workflow. The first thing I did was fetch the code so that I could see what it looked like, and then I pulled the code to bring it into my Visual Studio project. And I can see that by coming over here to the Solution Explorer, and there's that README file. And you can see that there's a little lock next to it now. Okay, so this is now part of my official Visual Studio repository, and we're good to go. There are two primary methods to get code from GitHub down to your computer. One is to clone, and the other is to fork. There are two types of cloning. One is to clone your own repository so that you can get a copy back on your computer. Maybe you accidentally deleted the files from your computer, or you have a new computer. That's a good example of that first type of cloning. The second type of cloning is when you're getting code from someone else. Maybe it's an open source project and you just want to check it out on your computer. You don't necessarily want to collaborate with anyone, you just want a copy of the code. The third scenario for why you might want to get code onto your computer is because you do want to collaborate on code. Someone's created this great repository and you want to take part in it. You want to add your own code and suggest it to the original developer. When you do that, you want to fork. What a fork does is it kind of creates a clone of that repo, someone else's repo, and puts it onto your repo. And GitHub remembers that that's connected to the other project. So when you make changes, you're still only making changes on your repo, either on your local computer or on GitHub. But then you have the opportunity to collaborate using things like pull requests. Now, unfortunately, this is a pretty long video, so I have to create another video on collaborating and doing pull requests and things like that. So what we're going to focus on in this video is just the far left side, which is cloning your own code or cloning someone else's code onto your local computer. First, let's start with cloning our own code. As you can see, I'm in the repo folder where I have my local code on my computer. I'm going to just right-click and delete that. So now it's no longer on my computer and I want to get it from GitHub. Before we clone our code in Visual Studio, I do want to point out that you can actually clone your code in a number of different ways. Here we're on GitHub and you can see I'm in my repo. There's a code menu. There's a URL that you can use to clone this repo. You can open it with GitHub Desktop, which is an app that GitHub makes. You might see open with Visual Studio, depending on the browser you're in. And you might even see, and then you will see download zip. But Visual Studio 2019 has this feature of cloning built in. So let's go over there and do that right now. Okay, so you can see that I was not in Visual Studio 2019 and I'm running it for the first time and I get this Get Started window. Now I'm not going to click on this, but you can see there's a clone a repository option. I'm going to show you a number of ways you can do this, and it's the same exact user interface, whether I click clone a repository or do this, which is continue without code. I can go to the File menu and choose Clone Repository. I can go to the Git menu and choose Clone. And then I can also come over here to Git Changes and choose Clone Repository. Each one of those does the same exact thing. So if I click Clone Repository, I'll get the same user interface. Here you can see that's the URL that you can paste in. Remember I told you that's kind of the universal way of doing things? Or you can just click GitHub. Because I'm logged in, you can see that it's going to allow me to clone any of my repos, or if I scroll down, any repos that I contribute to. I'm going to scroll back up. Here I'm going to choose the VS 2019 GitHub User Experience repo that we've worked with before. Now there's one thing I want you to be aware of. Here is where I like to keep my repos. It's in C users Bill Raymond source repos. But if I scroll over here a bit, what Visual Studio is going to do is it's going to say, well, you're logged in as Bill Raymond. See that? That's my account name inside of GitHub. It's actually going to put that under a folder called Bill Raymond. I don't want that, so I'm just going to remove that. If you want to keep it, go ahead. It doesn't matter. It's just going to put yet another folder structure in your computer, and I really don't like a lot of folder structures. So I'll go ahead and click Clone. Once your GitHub repo is cloned, you'll see here's your GitHub account and the name of the remote repo. Then we'll see our local repo, which is exactly what we'd expect. And then we'll see the word main. That's our main branch. Now it might open Team Explorer. And I want to point out that this is going away. So really don't focus on that. What you want to do is go to Solution Explorer. Now when you want to start working with your code, you'll notice that it's actually opened it up in a file view. And remember, you can get to that using the Switch Views icon. I want to use this using the C# sort of user experience Visual Studio 2019 provides. So I'm going to double click on my solution file. And if you created a project without the solution file, open up the project file. I'll double click on this. And now you can see I get that familiar user interface to work with my code. Now the other thing I will point out is, remember when we first started in this video and we made a change, we created a branch because this startup.cs file originally said hello world, and we created a branch to change it to hello first change. If I come down here to the bottom right and select main, you're going to see there is no branch where that code changes that we made. That's because GitHub only brought down the very main branch, the main line. So let's say I want that branch. I can come here to Manage Branches, and you can see over here on the left-hand side, there's two kind of branches. There's the main branch that's here on our local computer, and then there's the remote branch, which happens to be GitHub. And here you can see it brought over the main branch. We can see that right here. But it didn't bring over that modify hello text branch. What if I want this code on my computer? Well, I can select it, right click, and choose Checkout. And there, it's on my computer now. You can see it downloaded from GitHub, and it's here. I could have also right clicked and chosen Fetch and gone through that process to review the code and then pull it in. But I just choose Checkout because it's easier and faster. Now I told you the other thing that I wanted to show you in this video was to download code so that you could see it in Visual Studio, but not necessarily collaborate on it. This is just to, have the code so you can put it in Visual Studio on your computer. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to show you two different ways. So the first way is to look up the code you're looking for. Now I happen to have a friend named Hipster Bill Raymond. And so I'm going to look through all of GitHub and go to Users. And there he is. And this is the bike route planner that I'm looking for. And now what I want to do is come to the code menu and copy this URL. Remember, it's this URL up here at the top of the browser because I'm in the Bike Route Planner repo, and it just puts .git at the end. So if I come back over here to Visual Studio, go to the Git menu, and choose Clone Repository. By the way, this is just a fresh open copy of Visual Studio. Nothing's loaded right now. So I'll go ahead and paste that in and click Clone. Now that the project's been cloned, you can see that I can look at all the code. Here's the startup.cs file. And if I come down here, you can see that it has this heading on here that says, this is my cool Bike Route Planner app. Well, again, I just wanted to look at this code and try it out. If I make a change, let's say I just delete this H1 tag, I can do that. I can save it. And then I can even come over here to Git changes and commit it and say, removed H1 tag, and commit that. All of this is just fine. I got my commit message, everything's cool. But notice that it still has this push button here. And notice down below it says hipster Bill Raymond / Bike Route Planner. And I could actually try to push this code back up. And let's do that. I'm going to come over here to push. And it's going to try and initialize it and say it failed. Why is that? That's because I am not part of this repo. That person, that individual, never gave me access to edit the code. So if I wanted to edit the code, I could collaborate and send a pull request. But this isn't a very good practice to just go and clone someone else's code the way Visual Studio does it, because I'm actually linking to this person. So let me show you the right way to do it if you don't want to link up to someone else's code. This time what I'm going to do is make sure I'm in the repo that I want to clone, and I'm going to go to the copy menu and download the zip file. Okay. And now I'm going to go to the location where that zip file is, which is also in the place where I keep my code. I'll just right click on this and extract it. There. Now you can see there's a bike planner, and I'll open up the solution file. And there, it's open. Now what you can see is that this is the code, and it says add the source control down here. So now what you know is that you've just downloaded the code itself. If you want to put this under source control, make your own changes, and push it up to your own Git repo, you can, but you've completely separated yourself from the other individual's code. Now you should have a good idea as to how to use Visual Studio 2019 with GitHub. Of course, there's a lot more than I just showed you, and there's a lot for you to explore. But in the future videos, I'll show you how to create issues, pull requests, and even fork code so you can collaborate with someone else. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more like this, please like, comment, and click the bell to support my channel.